Alrighty, so we have a serious issue to address regarding the V10 M3 build. Before we get to that though, let's start off with some good news and put on a brand new water pump onto the S85. Welcome back to Yev's Builds. In front of me, I have two very cool pieces to the entire puzzle. There's a genuine V10 S85 water pump from BMW and a Motorrad 8890 thermostat, which is also used in the Dodge Viper. First off, Dave from Turner Motorsport. Again, I appreciate you more than I could say. You really hooked me up with this water pump, okay? At the time of this recording, these water pumps are kind of on a back order, I guess. Nobody really has them, and if they do, they kind of charge up the price. The dealer quoted me at about $900 for a genuine water pump, okay? That's ridiculous, if you ask me. Online, all the stores, they go for around $560, $580, $590. I've seen some for $600, you know what I mean? And Dave from Turner Motorsports really hooked me up and really gave me a good deal on this water pump. It's genuine and they had them in stock, so Dave, appreciate you once again. This thermostat, on the other hand, is not a genuine BMW thermostat for the V10. It's a Motorrad thermostat, which means it came from a Dodge Viper. Yes, a Dodge Viper and the S85 V10 share the same sized thermostats, as actually a lot of cars do, but the benefit of that is that this thermostat opens up later than a stock S85 V10 thermostat does. An engine, when it's running at full operating temperature, in this case the S85 runs at 212 Fahrenheit, right, 212 degrees Fahrenheit. When an engine is running at operating temperature, it is able to burn off whatever is bad in the oil, okay? Meaning if oil has some sort of water or maybe condensation, at full operating temperature, it is able to burn all that stuff off. In layman's terms, if the oil is happy, the engine is happy. For us to reach operating temperatures faster, I had to upgrade to this thermostat instead of the OEM one, because this thermostat, this Motorrad 8890, it opens up at 190 degrees Fahrenheit. The stock S85 V10 thermostat opens up at 179. In essence, the engine warms up quicker and gets to operating temperatures much faster. Those running a stock S85 V10 thermostat from BMW, I'm not bashing on you. It's just technically, if the engine warms up quicker, it is better for the engine itself. It's better for street use in particular, because once the engine is warmed up and gets to operating temperatures, the coolant kicks in, the thermostat opens up and it kicks in and it keeps it at that temperature more consistently, right? So that's why I went with this thermostat. So in my case, installing these two items today is going to be ridiculously easy because, well, the V10 definitely was torn completely apart at one point of its life, and I have definitely way more room to do this kind of stuff. I don't have any of the oil lines, any of the pulleys, nothing to remove at this point. Everything is just going back on. Also, keep in mind, I'm not entirely assembling this all the way because, well, there should be this high pressure oil line going to the Vanos units and whatnot. I am not installing that yet, simply because, well, this is going to get kind of in the way for whatever else I'm doing around here. So I'm just not going to tighten these two upper bolts on the water pump all the way. I'm just going to tighten them a little bit, make the water pump go in, and the rest is going to be cake. Which also, shout out to Ben at Hack Engineering for hooking me up with these lines as well. Both Vanos lines and this bottom one, and the internal one that's already inside, are steel braided, and they're braided for more pressure, but that's going to be for a different video. For now, I'm just going to install the water pump and the thermostat. Let's go. Okay, and now that the water pump and thermostat are on, let's get to the real meat and gravy of this video. We have an issue. The engine is sticking out way too much past the fender. Look, granted, this is about where it is, right? This is kind of like the level. If you look at it, it looks worse on video than it does in person. The front side of the engine, at least, is sticking up way too high than I would like it to be. That is my fault, because when I bought the subframe, I thought that it was already completely pre-made and finished and just ready for the swap, but it looks like the issue is now, well, the front end of it is sticking out way too much. Again, it looks way worse on video than it really does in person, so I'm not entirely sure where to begin now. Luckily, I don't think we're gonna have to redo the transmission mounts. Possibly the engine mounts we're gonna have to redo them. Not entirely sure yet, but my thinking is this. I mean, look, if you look at the stock E46 hood, right, sure, there's more room room up there, and the hood isn't straight, it kind of concaves inward, right? So that gives me a little bit more room there. Also, when the fenders are on, which I currently don't have on my shell, the fender itself adds another 1.25 inches roughly. So if we come back here and add 1.25 inches, that gives us 1.25 inches of extra clearance, clearly, right? So if we come down over here, let's just say this part, again, you can't really tell on video, but the engine is going to be pretty much hidden after that 1.25 inches, right? And also a stock E46 hood has a little hump in the middle, so it will give us a little bit more clearance. Yet still, I think that this is a little bit too high. And the only reason I really even realized this is because I put these intake manifolds on and just wanted to see how it's going to look with the manifolds, and realized that, dude, it's literally sticking up a lot. I also took off my stock strut brace. I kind of placed it right here, and we have a gap roughly like this, right? About 2.5 inches. I have seen people with this engine swap use the stock E46 M3 strut tower bar. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure, man. Between the oil pan and the subframe, I have roughly 1 inch, and a little bit, maybe a little bit more than 1 inch of space. And as well as right here, I really don't want to redo my entire engine mounts. These engine mounts create really good clearance for headers, that is one. And two, they create really good clearance for the steering rack. Regardless, I have some stuff planned out for this, but even a stock one will fit, if anything, you know what I mean? So I'm thinking of taking the mounting points of where the actual bushing sits, so this plate right here, and lowering it down about 1 inch, because can't really lower it too much because there's going to be another nut on that side for the lower control arm going through. So we need to keep in mind that this needs to have some sort of clearance. Okay, so I lowered the engine almost as low as I'd like it to be, almost as low. Regardless, the level is perfect. The only thing that is not perfect at this point on is the distance between this head and the frame, and that distance between that head and the frame, right? It's just a little bit off. I didn't center it quite exactly. I just did it just for the sake of this video. But oil pan to subframe clearance, it's like 15 mil I measured. The only thing I'm running into an issue as of that point is this steering rack fitting here. But if it doesn't fit all too well, what I could do is actually angle it downward just a little bit. The actual steering rack, instead of having it be straight like this, I could angle it down. That way the rack itself can clear this portion of the oil pan right here. That shouldn't be a problem either. Regardless, these I have to redo because they were welded on just roughly. They're not exactly spaced out perfectly. Actually, this distance right here is greater than that distance right here. Regardless, I'm gonna have to redo these tabs, but that's actually good because I can just angle them a little bit and angle the steering rack. The headers on this side still fit very well. There's plenty of room. The only thing I might have to do is cut into the actual frame a little bit just to kind of give myself a little bit more clearance there. Not a problem, I've seen people do this. On this side, I could not get the headers to fit at all, simply because the brake lines will be relocated and fitted more closely to the chassis. That is not a big issue. I'm not worried about that at all. At this point, I just want the engine to sit exactly where it needs to be, which is roughly where it is now. I dropped the whole engine by about 1 inch, 1.25 inches, maybe 1.5 inches at the very most, but that is nice. Also, if you look down here under the car, the lowest part of the transmission, which is this little tab right here, versus the oil pan, right, the lowest part of the engine, is actually relatively very straight. So this positioning of the engine and the way it's sitting now should not be a problem. This little square, I put it just for the sake of leveling the engine out and to kind of test fit the distance between how much we have to drop the actual engine mount itself, right? And the distance is actually not all that much. If we put this engine mount right where it belongs, right, kind of roughly seated onto its tab right here, it's seated okay, you can tell that the engine mount has to go up by roughly this top distance right here. So this brace has to go up ever so slightly, right? All right. I just got off the phone with Daniel, and essentially what we decided is actually even a simpler idea than I originally thought. Instead of us cutting up both engine mounts and, you know, moving up the entire triangular piece upward, we're gonna leave the engine mounts as they are, and what we're gonna do instead is actually cut this piece off, because if you don't know already, I bought the subframe pre-modified for this swap, and this is not quite exactly where we want it to be at this point, because now the engine is lower. So we're gonna cut this off and lower it exactly about 1 inch roughly. That's about how much I lowered the engine overall so far. We're gonna cut this off, and we're gonna actually cut into the subframe ever so slightly inside, weld it down, make sure that we're not covering this hole for the lower control arm, because the lower control arm has a stud going through the subframe, through the top right here, and it has to be locked down with a nut. So we're gonna cut these off, make new plates, cut into the subframe a little bit, measure everything out beforehand, obviously, because we don't want to redo this ever again. We're gonna cut it into here, lower this entire plate downward, that way the engine mount sits where it is, and also because of that, we don't need to remake any of the engine mounts. The reason we decided to go this route instead of cutting up these and moving this entire piece upward like this is because, first of all, if we move this another inch or so, there's gonna be absolutely no more room for gussets. They provide rigidity to the actual engine mount itself, and if we move them downward instead, if we move this bottom plate upward, pretty much all the way to the top, because that's how much it's gonna have to go, and put gussets on the bottom, we can't put gussets all the way up to here because then the engine mount bushing itself is going to be covered up, and we're going to end up with gussets being much shorter, which means this part right here is going to be weakened, right? You see what I'm saying? So this is the reason why we decided to stay with the mounts that we've already made and just lower this entire piece right there lower. That way we still have enough room for headers and enough room for the actual steering rack itself, because with this, the way it is right now, the steering rack has plenty of room to move. This is the best option, honestly. So there we have it, our biggest mistake so far. Now I can't even say our, it's my mistake for not measuring exactly everything perfectly, but the mistake is fixed, and I'm super proud to say that Daniel absolutely killed it here, dude. Look at this. It's sleek, it's nice, it's simple, it's gusseted out, it's strong. This is gonna do the job. Honestly, this is gonna do the job. Everything fits really nicely. Obviously, once this entire piece is completely ready to be put on the car permanently, I will get this all cleaned up all the way, get rid of all these little prickles over here and get it all cleaned up and powder coated. Beforehand though, we got to put these tabs back on, measure everything out correctly, put the steering rack back in, make sure the angle is correct, make sure that the geometry is correct and nothing's really getting ruined. But dude, overall this is pretty much done. I'm really happy with how this turned out. This hole right here as well as that hole right there are actually very important to us, and clearly we are clearing it. The reason why these two spots right here, these two holes are very important to us is that lower control arms studs go right through here and the nut tightens from this side. As you can see, this side has a little bit more room, right? This side, the stud barely touches this outer lip of the actual mount, and the nut is virtually impossible to remove, meaning that if I ever need to replace the lower control arm, God forbid, I'm actually gonna have to drop the subframe. I'm gonna have to loosen up this nut right here from the mount, drop it a little bit, loosen up these two bolts right here, loosen up these two, and drop the subframe ever so slightly for me to fit a wrench or something over this nut right here. The reason this side isn't gonna have an issue with me unscrewing this nut if I ever need to in the future, and this side does, is simply because you can't tell on video, and we actually didn't even know at first at all. This engine mount is a little bit further back in the block than the driver's side. Literally, this engine mount right here is closer to the front of the engine than this one. Usually, cylinder 1 is sticking out more further forward than cylinder 6, for example, in this case, right? But in this case, cylinder 1 is the passenger side, cylinder 6 is the driver's side, and cylinder 6 is closer to the outside than cylinder 1. So for that reason, this engine mount has to be further down that way, closer to the firewall, to balance out the actual engine. So because of this bushing right here barely clears that. Yep, and there it is. There it is, seated all nice and tucked away. Dude, this is absolutely stunning. Believe it or not, a whole inch drop made a huge difference in this case. Can't really tell on video. Of course you can't. You can never tell much on video, but this is sitting way lower. This is beautiful. This is really beautiful. And the best part about this whole thing is that when I put the steering rack onto the actual subframe and kind of, you know, put it to where it's going to be roughly, it clears all of this space right here, and it's absolutely beautiful. Headers are going to fit, everything's going to fit, and dude, I'm beyond stoked. Another fun fact, look how perfectly level this engine is. It is absolutely perfectly leveled, and it's sitting under its own weight. That makes me happy. And to be 100% honest with you, with the plenums on, this so far is the absolute best view I have seen in a long time. Again, videos do not do justice, but this, the hood is gonna clear it. Literally, the plenums are under this entire piece right here. They're under it. This is gonna be clearing. This is gonna be good. This is the most beautiful view I have seen in person. This is stunning. This is beautiful. This is mental. I love it. Dude, there's still a lot of work ahead of me, but This makes me really happy, very happy. So dude, I'm beyond happy, man. And I think on this note, that's where I'm gonna end this video today. If you're a follower of this channel, I'm sorry that this video came out a little bit repetitive, similar to the previous one, but dude, we had to do what we had to do, and you know, I figured might as well make a video out of it so that you would know if you're about to do something like this, dude, just double check your work. I guess the moral of the story is to double check your work, all right? But in the next video, the plan is to fit the headers in, officially bolt them down, do all the adjustments that we need to do, make the steering rack fit, and make everything else fit for the final time until we pull everything out and get going with other stuff. So if you've clicked on this video already and you're interested in stuff like this, and this build particularly, dude, I'd appreciate you. I know it's cliche, but if you hit the subscribe button and you hit the like button, that stuff helps a ton. So on that note, appreciate y'all. Peace.